Welcome to the Rap Soul Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of music that moves our hearts and gets our feet tapping. This is the intersection of rap and soul music from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We appreciate you for listening. Share this podcast with a friend or family member who loves music as much as you do. The podcast is hosted by 12 Kyle. Next up, the Rap Soul Podcast.
I think in hip hop, we as fans were very critical about those who were able to sell records. And we were even more critical about those who we thought sold records and sold out to sell records. That's a difference. We weren't as critical of those who were able to cross over, but we were very critical of those who sold their souls, if you will, to cross over. Welcome to another edition of the Rap Soul Podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Again, this is the Rap Soul Podcast. This is the intersection where we have discussions about music and artists from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s when it comes to rap, hip hop, soul, and R&B. Simply put, folks, this is the best music podcast that you have never heard until right now. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Shout out to those of you who are watching on YouTube as well as Spotify. Now, what you just heard was a clip from a man, Big Gip, from the Goody Mob. Shout out to Gip. He brings an interesting thought and concept. And when I saw the clip, I wanted to add that to this discussion because it's worthy of it. And I go back to something that I saw on my homies podcast. Shout out to the boys at Dead End Hip Hop. Those are my boys. They asked this question on an episode probably about a year or so ago. Is there a difference between crossing over and selling out? And as you see on the cover art, I have a picture of one Vanilla Ice and the rap group EPMD. And I'll explain why I did that in just a few minutes. But before I get to Gip's point, again, shout out to the fellas because they actually talked about this. Is there a difference between crossing over and selling out? Yes and no. And it really depends on who you ask and where they are when you ask them. Because at one point in time in hip hop, or let me go back, at one point in time in rap, it was a cardinal sin to cross over and have mass appeal. Shout out to Gangstar. But you didn't want to have mass appeal. Like, hip hop in its essence was something that was from the streets. It was from the culture. It was from our culture, Black culture, right? Birthed in the Boogie Down Bronx, Argue with Your Mama, about its origins in Kool Herc. That being said, that's where it came from. And so in the early stages of its infancy in the 70s and 80s, you know, the idea or the ideology of an artist was a rapper wanted to be heard. They wanted to get a record deal. They wanted to be heard. They wanted to make some money. There was no rapper in the 70s and more specifically in the 80s that saw rap as a long-term thing. They didn't think it would be something that they would retire off of. Nobody thought that they could make millions off of it. But a funny thing happened as we moved into the 90s. Record companies started making millions off of this music. And so the artists obviously wanted to get a piece of the pie, and rightfully so. But the thing about it was that we had not seen a lot of artists who had a lot of commercial success. And so by that would mean to cross over. Because here's the thing. In hip hop, you made your records for the streets. And there was no such thing as a party record. There was no such thing as a radio record. You made your records for the streets. You made it for the people on your block, the people in your neighborhood, the people in your town or your city to listen to. And it wasn't until the music expanded and our reaches expanded to the point where you could make a song like Fuck the Police in Compton, California, and it could reach a kid all the way in Florence, South Carolina, named 12 Kyle. Or you could make a song like Posse and Broadway in Seattle, Washington, and reach a kid in Chicago, Illinois. That didn't happen until hip hop or rap, if you will, expanded. And so there was a lot of pushback when the success started coming. And it's kind of weird when you think about it, because in your mind, you're thinking, okay, well, if you're going to rap, I would think that you would want to make money, right? I mean, you already got your record deal. You would want to make some money. And it was just a weird concept, because in rap at that particular time, it was okay to make money, just not too much money. It was okay to sell records, just not too much records. You couldn't sell too many records. And now where that line was drawn really depended on who you asked. And so I will use, for example, the great MC Hammer. Listen, people can say what they want to say about Hammer. I did an episode earlier in this podcast about, I think, hip hop owed Hammer an apology, because Hammer made the same kind of records that he had before. It wasn't until he used a sample of a very popular song by Rick James called Super Freak. He called it You Can't Touch This, and the song exploded like wildfire, and Hammer became a household name. That song became a household song. And this was in a time where rap, and I think this was what, 87, 88, somewhere around there, 89. Forgive me for not knowing the year, but my point is that rap wasn't that big then. It was big, but it wasn't that big. And Hammer was everywhere. There was like Hammer pants, and there was Hammer cereal and Hammer cartoons. And it was, I mean, Hammer enjoyed a boatload of success. You heard about his tours where he would have 30 people on stage, and Hammer put on a show. And even to this day, in his 60s, Hammer still can throw down as far as dancing is concerned. But the sad thing is that there were a lot of people in the rap communities that didn't like the success that Hammer had, because he had crossed over. And some people call Hammer a sellout. Now, I don't think Hammer sold out. He sold a lot of records, but it wasn't like, if you go back and listen to Please Hammer Don't Hurt Him, which was the commercial successfully album that went, I think that album went diamond. If you go back to his first album, those songs sound the same. I mean, like, he didn't switch anything up. It wasn't like he sampled The Police and used Every Breath You Take to be his number one hit like some people. But I digress. But you get the point. So, like, I always looked at like selling out as if you specifically said, okay, well, hey, where I'm positioned in rap or music isn't good enough. I'm going to sell my soul and create a persona, or create a song, or create a movement, or create a wave to where it'll earn me money. And I think if we're being honest, we probably see more artists like that today than we did yet in yesteryear. So I don't think Hammer sold out. He crossed over, but he didn't intentionally cross over. Now, when you look at an artist like Vanilla Ice, who I mentioned I have on the cover art to this particular podcast, Vanilla Ice was the white answer to Hammer, if you will, for some people. And Vanilla Ice wasn't from the culture. Vanilla Ice wasn't someone who paid his dues, at least by rap standards, he didn't. And so Vanilla Ice, because of the popularity of his song Ice Ice Baby, and if we're being honest, because of the popularity of what he looked like, he was able to get on MTV and blow up. And I can't really fault Vanilla Ice for that. I don't know Vanilla Ice personally, so I don't know what his intentions were. But I will say this much. He definitely crossed over. He wasn't street enough or entrenched in the culture enough for me to say that he sold out, because he was never here to sell out. He was here to cross over. And he crossed over and he did well and made a lot of money. And if you look at the other picture, is the rap group EPMD, who had a song called Crossover. And in the song, they talked about not wanting to cross over, keeping their music funky, staying real, staying true to who they were. And I think what we eventually saw in hip hop was artists who could do just that, who could be authentic, stay within the culture, and then have their music transcend and show up on MTV, show up on Top 40. But yet they still, to the core, stayed true to who they were and the music and their fans. And so while EPMD made that song, I don't think EPMD was trying to diss anyone particular, although we have our theories. I understood the song and I liked it. And I still like it to this day. And I thought it was very key at that particular time because it needed to be said. But, you know, I remember, I think it was either Havoc or Prodigy from Mobb Deep that said in the song, "No matter how much loot I get, I'm forever staying in the projects." No, you're not. I mean, who wants to do that? I would think that if you grew up in the projects of Queensbridge, there would be some point where you would make enough money to move yourself out, move your family out, move your mama out. I don't think you would want to stay there. And that's no knock on Queensbridge. I've never been there before, but I've heard stories. And so progression is the word. You would all want to progress. We all want to progress. But at the same time, let's just be honest. You know, that was just a line in a song. I don't think for a second that, you know, Prodigy, rest in peace, or Havoc still living in Queensbridge. If they did, now Prodigy obviously no longer being here, but if his family's still in Queensbridge, okay, salute to them. But I would think that they aren't there anymore. I'm almost certain that Havoc doesn't live in Queensbridge anymore. But I said all that to say this: there was a fine line between how hip hop accepted you in whether or not your records could sell and whether or not you did it specifically to cross over. And then after a certain time, once we moved into like the mid 90s, it was the thing to do. You wanted to sell records. You wanted to make money. You wanted to show people that you had money. So if Jay-Z had come out in 1986, as opposed to coming out in 1996, those are two different Jay-Z's, because one would have been chastised and criticized for talking about materialism and then basically living the lifestyle that he talked about. And the other would have been celebrated and propped up on a pedestal for doing such things, for overcoming and, you know, going from a hustler to this multi-millionaire rapper. And so if Jay-Z comes out in 1986, he's not the same Jay-Z that we know and grow to love. And that's just being honest, because he would have been met with pushback. You couldn't talk about those type of things. You couldn't flaunt that type of lifestyle. You couldn't aspire or at least jump on the charts and have your videos be played on MTV and have, you know, top 40 radio stations playing your music. Some would say Jay-Z would have not even crossed over. He would have sold out in 86 if that had happened. But look at what 10 years makes. And I'm just using Jay as an example. I love his music. Always been a big fan. I think he's one of the greatest lyricists ever. That being said, I think in hip hop, we as fans were very critical about those who were able to sell records. And we were even more critical about those who we thought sold records and sold out to sell records. That's a difference. We weren't as critical of those who were able to cross over, but we were very critical of those who sold their souls, if you will, to cross over. Now, if you look at the landscape of rappers today, there's not one rapper that's going to tell you that they want to stay broke. Hell, there's not even one rapper that's going to tell you that they are broke. And keep in mind that if you look at the tree of the money that's being made in music, the artist is always on the bottom of the tree. So for as much as your favorite rapper brags about they have a $500,000 around their neck, and they might just have that, but understand that the jury may be rented, and they may be robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you will. So in conclusion, I think we have to look at that at a broader scope to answer the question. I don't think that I think selling out at this point is possible. And I think there are some artists, some of your favorite artists, who have literally sold their souls for monetarily gains. I mean, there are some artists that you and I both listen to and love. They've definitely sold their souls. And for them, it's okay, I guess, But as far as crossing over, I don't necessarily know that there's artists that are crossing over, because there's such a blend now with, music and pop culture that, to Gip's point, we are the culture. We are the culture that people tap into. So things aren't the same, and I respect Gip's opinion, and things were definitely different in the 90s and the 2000s. And they were vastly different from how life was and music was in the 80s. And, soul and the culture, to his point, he's correct. It's definitely not where it once was in hip hop. Who's to blame for that? Probably us, if we're being honest. Some of our elder statesmen, some of our gatekeepers, have influenced and gotten in the way of a lot of things. But on the flip side of it, selling out and crossing over doesn't or look or feel the same as it did in 1987. It just doesn't. And there's no rhyme or reason for that. I mean, times and everything were changed. It's at the time of this recording, it's 2026. So if you go back to 1986, yeah, I mean, rap was really just starting to pop, really, for outside of New York City. And how we got to the music and how the music got to us was totally different. So yeah, I was happy to see my favorite rap group on MTV. But I also understood that when I saw, Public Enemy on Yo MTV Raps, that was going to be the only chance I got. But in doing that, they were exposed to different audiences, so that was able to prop Public Enemy up. And I think, to some degree, we wanted to hold everybody in the culture together, and we wanted to hold rap and keep rap in this one little box. And in reality, we couldn't. And I don't necessarily know or have a great answer for as to why that happened, or why we feel that way, or who's to blame for it. Maybe there's no blame to go around at all. Maybe it's just one of those things that happened. Maybe, just maybe, it was evolution. But no, I don't think you can be chastised or criticized for crossing over right now, because any and everybody that makes music to this day wants to get paid. They want to maximize whatever time they have in the spotlight to make as much music as they can. And I don't blame them for that, because they should. We live in a capitalistic society. You should want to earn as much as you can for as long as you can. Now, selling out, yeah, it's some sellouts out there. It's some real big sellouts out there. It's some people who are aligning themselves with other people that they probably shouldn't. And, when it hits the fan, as, K-Dot said, when the shit hits the fan, they'll realize it. And, all money ain't good money. But that's for them to figure out. But as far as selling out, yeah, there's definitely some sellouts. You see them, you know them. And for some, they've been selling out for so long, it don't even look like selling out. It's just part of their DNA. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the Rap Soul Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe this podcast. We're on YouTube as well. You can watch us on YouTube as well as Spotify. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I will catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. This concludes the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Rap Soul podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the podcast on social media. And feel free to continue this discussion on our Reddit page. More importantly, share this podcast with a friend or family member who loves music as much as you do. Until next time, 5,000.